and welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday interview sessions. And today I'm really excited to be joined by a very good friend of mine, Cathleen Merkel. Kathy, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
So first of all, thank you, Ryan, for having me. Always love chatting to you, so I was very excited to meet you today. Well, the introduction you did already. My name is Cathleen Merkel, German-born, but I say I was made in England. So I've lived here now for 10 years. And similar to you, I quit my corporate job last year in June. So I'm close to celebrating my first year anniversary.
Amazing.
Yes, it has been such an amazing journey. So now I can really focus full time on helping as many women out there as possible, and a few men as well, who I'm still working with, to really live their best lives. I'm a mindset and leadership coach, but I would rather say I want to see myself as a thought provoker and as a thought maker who simply brings in some different aspects on leadership, and who really helps people to go and look beyond their job descriptions, because they only have one life. And I basically encourage them to make the best out of their lives at work and outside of work.
I love that. I mean, you've held some fairly, prominent leadership positions. We're talking regional across Europe. And I'd just love to know, some of the things that you've learned about yourself and your own kind of leadership in that time.
Oh gosh, I've learned so much. So when I started becoming a manager, or stepping slowly but surely, I would say, into management roles, I wasn't a leader at this time. I was 21, and I was such a cow. Seriously, I honestly, it's just the way it was. I was very black and white. I was very direct. I was very like, here is the rule sheet. That's what we've got to follow. And at the same time, I was looking after, at this time, I think 16 apprentices. And that's when I noticed where I fell into the caring mode, into supporting them, into helping them learn. So there was a real difference. And I noticed in myself that this is much more fun. This is really lovely. And it came from the perspective that I had just finished my apprenticeship, so I really could put myself into their shoes. But also, I realized these guys are here to learn. These guys don't know things yet, and I have a massive responsibility to help them. And the way is not to say this is black and this is white and this is what you have to do and this is what you can't do. So that was a massive learning curve for me. That was also the time when I had my own coach. So my boss at the time said to me, look, I appreciate that I put you into a biggish role at a very young age, and I am not here locally, so therefore I want you to have support. Choose a coach who you would like to work with and who's going to support you. And that was for me big, because suddenly I just had someone I could really open up to, and I don't think I've had that before at all. I haven't had that in my family necessarily. I haven't had that with my friends. I can open up to them, but they didn't understand the job I was doing. So that was just wonderful to be able to open up, but also to have a mirror who simply calls it out when she sees BS on my side, or who simply challenges my behaviors. So that was brilliant. And you mentioned that I had some multinational roles. I was looking after locations such as Russia, locations such as New Zealand, Australia, Dubai, the Middle East, and Europe at the same time. And even within Europe, you have so many different locations and cultures and approaches. None of those countries are quite the same. And working internationally, that was the moment I moved to the UK 10 years ago, made the biggest shift for me. Because I couldn't just do or have the approach, it's my way or the highway. It was impossible. Suddenly I was in an environment where I noticed my way of working, my way of communicating doesn't land, because the culture around me is different. And I still remember, and I hope my friend is going to listen to that actually. I worked with a really wonderful colleague who was quite a few years older than me and who was very elegant. I called her Lady Jane because she was ladylike. And she was born and raised in England. And I remember she asked me a question, and I turned around and I just said no, because my answer to the question was no. You are laughing, right? Because you get it. If I did that in Germany, they were like, yeah, but if the answer is no, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the UK, obviously. And that was the first experience when she then turned around to me and she said, you can't just say no in this country. I'm like, why not? There's no yes to this answer, to this question. And she said, well, you still have to be very polite and say, yes, perhaps, under those circumstances, let's investigate. And I still can't quite grasp it because there was still no way into that. But at the same time, what I understood was I need to understand the cultures properly. I need to make an effort to put myself into those different countries, how they operate, how they communicate with each other, what are the informal and formal rules of conduct, and simply step back, shut up, and listen a wee bit more and be more curious. So that was number 2. And number 3 was, and I think that is for me the biggest learning journey. So I've told this story on so many podcasts, so I'll make it very short. I grew up in East, former communist Germany. And people obviously weren't allowed to travel necessarily, only to the communist countries. And life was very restricted. You couldn't get all the products you wanted to get, and so on and so forth. And there was the sense, at least in my family, that was all about how we are being perceived. So yes, we grew up on the less beneficial side of Germany, but let's still make sure we are being perceived as we have it all and everything is going all right, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I was raised with a lot of expectations, how I behave, how I should be, with a lot of shoulds and musts and so on. And that was a part of me. So at a very young age, I realized later through therapy that I kind of was shaped by my mother mainly, but I completely unlearned who I was. So I was literally just focused in the very communist way on delivering, on being successful, achieving, in order to make sure you have a very safe life. You have a house at some point, you have a family, and it's safe. It's the nice, safe container. Oh man, sorry, I'm going to say this bullshit. Jesus Christ. It took me years, valuable years, to get through this and to break through this habit of trying to please everyone else and to be the way other people want me to be instead of just being who I am. And it took me years to understand who I am. And the brilliant thing was that I explored a lot of that at work in leadership roles because I received feedback. People were interested in my growth, in success. They wanted to see me get to the next level, which is brilliant. And so therefore, they gave me very direct feedback. So the direct feedback I took on board, but in terms of, okay, now I have to be even better and I have to do more and I have to work my butt off every day. And it led me to a near burnout. So I was really exhausted and basically lived such an unhealthy life. And I felt never enough. And that was for me the breaking point when I said I had to change some things. I did a lot of things. I did some solo traveling to very spiritual places in the world where I rediscovered myself with the kindness of the people around me. I did therapy. I had coaches. And I let loose. I let go of all the constraints through this, and I started my own coaching journey. And I think that was the last piece of the puzzle, because as you may know, when you are being trained as a coach, my goodness, you have to go through all your own stuff, which is tough, which is challenging. But I came back as a person who was warmer, who was kinder, who removed the wall around her, who is completely present with others, and therefore more successful. But it felt so much easier, so much simpler. And I stop here. I could talk about that topic forever.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. That's a powerful story. And, you know, I think you've really alluded to some of those key traits of leadership, the natural coach, the seeking empathy, understanding, asking curious questions. And I'm conscious about this one word of legacy. And I think there's an element of legacy that showed up in your story where not only have those that have gone before you got the best out of you by giving you that feedback so that you can go on and achieve more. But you're now starting up your own, or you run your own leadership company, and there's a legacy of your own. How much do you think about legacy?
I think a lot about legacy, but less in a quantitative way. I don't say, no, I want to get millions of people to do exactly what I've done. That is simply not the case. But for me, legacy is all about what trace, what impression I leave with others that have been working with me, that I encountered, that I met. And I want everyone to leave with some inspiration where they say, I can do that. I can, better myself every day. I can live a life that's far more fulfilled without the shoulds and musts. So I want to leave one thing with everyone that helps them let go of all the negativity, the negative self-beliefs, all of that helps them feel better about themselves.
So you work, so a new client comes to you, female leader, very successful, completely neglecting her own self in terms of her energy, never feels enough. They come to you. I imagine they're exactly your ideal client because that was you however many years ago. Like where do you start with people like that?
So when they come to me and we have an initial meeting, then I'm being curious. That's all. Because putting myself into their shoes, what they really value is someone who's simply there for them and listening. So the first meetup, basically, I don't even want to call it session, is all about letting them chat, letting them self-explore their life. And I do that by asking them curious questions, how they manage themselves, what's working really well in their lives, what they are proud of. So positivity is something really important to me. I want every meeting, every encounter we have, I want them to feel confident about themselves and positive about themselves. So it's not about focusing on just on the challenging pieces. So we are really exploring their lives and just identifying what are the core areas that would be useful to focus on and that will probably bring in the biggest change for these ladies, and then obviously explain how I work and what opportunities we have to work together. In our proper first coaching session, and I want to say that I have a combination of coaching and mentoring. So I love to be able to bring in experiences, to share tools, to share suggestions. And I realized that my clients really value that as well. Instead of only asking questions and helping them to find their own solutions, that's still a very important piece, but I combine it. In the first session, we're really diving into their entire life. So I actually had recently, again, one of those female leaders, just such a wonderful soul. And I can see them in front of me and I can see the deep, deep parts of them where I know they are hurt, they are to a certain extent suffering even. They are really just seeking for this different way of living, but they have absolutely no idea in this moment how to get there because they're literally distracted and surrounded by the fog of busyness and stress and expectations. So it's really important that we focus on the whole life, and I go really detailed through their different areas of life, and I let them decide what that is, as to whether it's career, finances. With her, it was her relationship with the husband, time for the kids, social environment, so lack of connections to friends and understanding. And what we most come back to, similar to my story, it's so strange, is the mother. So at some point, family is being broken down into, well, all of the family, here's my mother. And here's the relationship I have with her. And here's the relationship I've had with her in the past. And now I realize there are certain habits that I have literally grown up with and that I have made mine because they came from her. In particular, the behavior around pressure, trying to constantly exceed expectations, never feeling good enough because they receive probably quite a bit of criticism for everything they try to do well, and so on and so forth. So that's the first session. And we finished the session with, okay, and what is the life you want to live? How do you want to be as a leader? What does leadership mean to you? And that's the moment when I can take them out of leadership at work and just making it about the career, and how you can show up as a leader in your whole life.
Yeah, love that. You, I've seen you run something called the Legendary Leader Framework, and obviously that's the name of your podcast. What does it mean to be a legendary leader?
So yeah, the podcast is Legendary Leaders, and I have the legend framework that I basically work along through the mastermind sessions and the coaching sessions. So legendary leader is someone for me, and it makes me smile. You meet this person, and the vibe you get from this person is calm, peace, content, pure joy. And that doesn't mean that this person is happy 24/7 and, you know, is jumping around and dancing all day long. This is not what it means, but it means I am really content with my life. I practice gratitude. I love how I live, not necessarily what I have. And I feel really okay with myself knowing all my flaws. That's for me legendary. And by being this way, you basically, in the most positive sense, become contagious to other people. And other people kind of want to follow you. They are curious about how you got there, what you practice in order to be this way. They want to work with you. So you take out the forced element of leadership. I need to communicate every day in order for my people to feel okay. I need to behave in a certain way and communicate very professionally. I need to be always chippy chappy, because then people will like me. You simply are the way you are, and you're purely authentic. And I know this word is overused, I still like it. So you're purely authentic and real. And
I think the reason it is overused is because we have flooded the workplace with people that feel that they need to be something to fulfill a criteria, fulfill a role. And we're coming to learn that. And I think we're recognizing those that are authentic, that aren't playing that. And we're craving that style of leadership. In reality, it's the opposite. We just need less people feeling like they need to be something that they're not to fulfill a role and a criteria.
Exactly. And I still have quite a few discussions with people I work with in workshops or coaching sessions who say, but I have to be very different at work. I'm very different when I am with my kids. Yes, of course, when you are with your kids, you might use a different language. You are obviously in a different way, but it doesn't change your personality. You're still caring, you are empathetic, you are trying to understand them, you are being curious about them. You're supporting them. You want them to better themselves every day and grow up in a most protective, but also wonderful world where they can explore themselves. So what about that has to be different at work?
Yeah, absolutely. What have you learned through, I think for me personally, with being a podcast host, A, I love it, and B, like I get to learn firsthand from some amazing people like your good self. What have you learned so far through interviewing legendary leaders?
Oh man, where to start? So I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
I've wanted to be, when I was in my teens, I wanted to be a radio DJ, right? So I'm now kind of fulfilling this passion. I absolutely love, as you do, podcasting, meeting different people and learning from them. But I also started podcasting because I wanted to get the message out about leadership and legendary leaders. And I am really video shy. I do more of them nowadays, but I'm nowhere near where you are. I'm really insecure about being visible. And that's for me a wonderful way to get the message out and to speak to a larger audience. So overcoming my fear of becoming visible, because I was really nervous about my accent, my grammar, do I know enough, all of this kind of stuff. And now I'm like, nah, I'm going with the flow. It's just awesome. You know, I don't have to know everything, but I know I have to share a lot. And the guests and the conversation is what matters, and making that as engaged as possible so that people can really relate to the story. So that's number one. Number two is I learned just from so many fighters out there how they overcame their challenges. And every guest on my show had some sort of a breaking point, some sort of a moment of, oh, damn, I need to work through this. And this is how I'm going to do that now. As you shared yours, which is just wonderful. And it makes me feel very humble and often very reflective afterwards to say, I'm going to practice that. I'm going to see how I could do that, how that could work. Something that my podcast initiated for me was that I'm now moving into learning more about neuroscientific coaching. So I really like the neuroscience and really understanding how the brain works and how it impacts our choices and decisions and so on. And I only learned through it because I had two guests who spoke about it a lot, and I just found that fascinating. So I started reading about it, and now I really want to dive into that and become a coach that's focused on this area, and so on and so forth. So there is no episode that doesn't give me some sort of a new learning.
I love that. What has been some of the greatest gifts that you've given yourself in your own journey?
The greatest gift, number one, is to have put my wall down. And that was hard because I had built it up for 27, maybe 30 years. And the moment that wall was down, I was a completely different person. I felt sorry.
I was going to say, did it come down brick by brick, or did you bulldoze it down?
No, it came down brick by brick. Well, the first pieces came down brick by brick, and then I had this travel experience where the rest of them just bulldozed it down, basically. 2 stages, but it took a while overall. But that's just been so amazing. And the moment when I realized that, in the moment I was just simply being, I was just myself, and I was so happy with myself. Not in terms of I was perfect. I'm nowhere near perfect, but I was just all right. I was just okay with myself. I accepted myself completely, and that was amazing. And that shifted my life, my relationships, with myself and with others completely. I was able to forgive my mom and to simply build a really great relationship with them, which we have nowadays, and so on and so forth. So that was definitely number one. And number two, I'm really grateful for is that I became braver. Braver to express my voice, my views, to challenge, and to make choices for my life that just better my own life and obviously the life of my partner and my family, leaving the corporate job. And whilst I was in a corporate role, to say, look, this role is not for me. It doesn't make me happy at all. I just feel like pushing a square peg into a round hole. And to be able to express that, I found really important, and I'm very grateful for it.
What made you realize that you were, I think Steve Jobs is well renowned for talking about the misfits and the square pegs, and what made you realize you're a square peg? And then I think if I relate to my own journey, I felt very similar, and I craved fitting in and belonging for so long that it caused me more pain than it should have. At what point did you make that decision that actually I am a square peg, I'm happy, and I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be? Talk to me about that process.
So I just remember this one moment when I really felt like that. It was all about emotions. It was all about feeling, and it was a leadership get together. But it wasn't the leadership team I was a part of. It was a wider functional leadership team I never really felt a part of. I never really felt connected. And I feel connected when I can be simply myself, when I can be very open, I can have banter and giggle. But I also can ask for help, and I know there is support. And with this team, I've never felt this way. And this meeting was really interesting. It was a brainstorming meeting, and they flew in all sorts of people from the States and so on and so forth. And it felt like I was literally observing the room. And it felt like tons of egos coming together, trying to force their opinions onto one another, but without listening. And I was literally observing, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And I was slightly, sometimes a bit unconventional. I like to bring in new ideas and to just shift the thinking a little bit. And I realized that every time I shared something or I suggested something, it just didn't land. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it why it was. It wasn't, I realized it wasn't because of behaviors or anything like that necessarily. It just didn't land. And I had this feeling more and more like I was withdrawing. And I was literally feeling really constricted as well. I felt really kind of claustrophobic in myself. And I had this need to get fresh air and to just break out. And that's for me the feeling when I know it's an unhealthy way of not belonging and not fitting. And I had a conversation afterwards with my boss because he said, man, you were really quiet. What was going on? I was just really open with him. And he said, oh, he feels that sometimes as well, but he's just getting on with it. But for me, I don't want to just get on with it, but because I love working and I love to work in environments that are very open. And it reminded me of an experience I had before that job in a different company where the wider team, we were just fantastic. It was just brilliant. We challenged each other. We weren't necessarily all best friends, but we were really constructive with each other. We could play hard and work hard, right, at the same time. And we therefore achieved together. Because it was so open, it was transparent, it was constructive, it wasn't wishy-washy, and we came all from different countries in the world. But there was a strong connection under strong leadership. And I always had that in my mind because I absolutely loved that team environment. I left more for my own development. And I didn't get it there. And I constantly felt wrong. And that's not a good feeling to have. So you need to reflect upon, okay, is there something I want to change? I can change? Is that an environment I want to work in? And therefore I need to make some changes in my mindset or behaviors or whatever it is. Or is that simply a moment of accepting this might simply not be for me? And that's what it was for me. It wasn't for me.
I'm really interested in this narrative of you never being enough through growing up and through the kind of stories that you've played over, to then becoming a full-time coach. And I know that a lot of coaches at the start of their journey have this sense of imposter syndrome, this sense of, am I going to be good enough to help these people? Like, how did you get through that to, if at all that's even something you experienced?
Yes, absolutely. And I still experience it, just less of it. So I would throw out the assumption that you may never fully get rid of imposter. And I do believe that's a good thing. So the important piece is to be self-aware and to hear it, to hear the voices, to check in, to take them in and to say, okay, what benefit do they have? What value do they have right now? How do I speak to them? But I think if you don't have that anymore and you don't have certain expectations on yourself and you say, let's check in with myself as to whether what I'm doing and how I'm doing it is a good way to go about things, I think then your ego is clearly a bit too high. So therefore, I'm also quite grateful that I still have it. But I silenced it slightly and I can manage it better. So when the voices come in, then I simply check in with it. I basically have a conversation with my own inner voice. Yes. That there's, okay, what are you trying to help me with, to support me with? What are you trying to tell me? And really focus on the positive side of what support do I get. And if I think I have it under control and I think, it's all good, then I say, hey, thanks for your help. But at the moment, I'm absolutely fine. But if I realize there is something to it because I was slacking off a little bit, for example, then I need to say, I need to up my game here. I need to show up more. And it helps me up my game and to show up again. So therefore, I see it as quite valuable. Yeah.
I like that. Great description. You talked at the start about being curious, and you and I both share this love for being curious and asking curious questions. What are some of those key questions that you intentionally use to reflect, to grow, to learn?
So one question, I'm going to steal that from one of my podcast guests and friends. She said to me in the podcast, so many people ask themselves every day what they have done. Have we ticked off our to-do list nicely? Instead of how have I been? And that's true. And when I started the business, my goodness, I was focused on what have I done? Have I developed this program now properly? Have I met with people? Have I made enough contacts? But how have I been is such a more powerful question. And it brings up a lot of reflection, because it's not just how have you been with others, it's about how have you been with yourself. Have you been kind to yourself? Have you taken care of yourself? All of these things. The other question is, have I stepped out of my comfort zone today? If so, how? Because I'm a massive fan of growth mindset, and I'm a massive fan of learning. Have I done something that made me uncomfortable? And it doesn't mean in a stressful way. In combination with it, have I been brave? So have I had a brave conversation? Have I called out a really uncomfortable elephant in the room when coaching someone, for example? And then there's another one, have I supported someone today? Because not every day I have necessarily coaching sessions, right? I'm working a lot on developing further programs and so on. But have I supported someone? If so, how? And that helps me reflect upon my entire life. So the clients, obviously, I'm working with, but the community I support through social media, friends of mine, my partner. What have I done to make the world a little bit better and to give something back? So that's for me the third/fourth key question.
I love that. Kind of ties in nicely to my next question. My whole ethos is about helping people be always better than yesterday. And I'm just curious to know what that phrase, always better than yesterday, means to you.
I would steal it if I could, because, because it's such a wonderful phrase. It is, I really resonate with it because it resonates with my legacy. I want to leave a new way of learning, a new way of I can do that as well with other people, to help them better their lives. And what I always say to the people I work with, and to anyone really, is this is not about taking big steps and making huge changes from one day to another. This is about taking it gently and improving yourself, your life, step by step every day, and taking small steps. So this continuous level of improvement, this continuous level of self-reflection, and this continuous level of really getting the best out of your life is what resonates with always better than yesterday.
Nice. I love that. How can people connect with you? How can people find out more about you and your content?
So one of the best platforms is my website. That's CathleenMerkel.com. Very simple. Kathleen with a C and Merkel at the end with an EL, not the English way. Then Instagram, Facebook, Cathleen Merkel. I am just about to start a book club with my dear friend Jules O'Donnell. That is going to be the Unique Leaders Book Club. You can find that already on Facebook and Instagram as well. I have the podcast that's called Legendary Leaders, as you know. And LinkedIn, obviously, as well, where you can find me. So yeah, check those platforms out and get in touch.
That's amazing. And who should specifically get in touch with you?
Well, anyone can get in touch with me. I'm always curious about people. But the majority of my clients indeed are female leaders in and outside of organizations, and the women who resonate with my story basically and see themselves in it and say, oh, yes, that's where I am at the moment. And I have absolutely no idea how to get unstuck. Then you are the right person to get in touch with me.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing some of your stories and insights. And I would just be honored if you could leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Wow. A final thought from my good self is, you can always make a change. Don't get held back by what job you have at the moment, how much you're earning, your age, anything. You can always make change happen if you really want to get support and just go for it.
What an ending. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.